Manhattan panel. Let's start with introducing Mr. Kane Hodder.
Thank you.
Next up, Barbara Bingham.
Gotta love that scene. I do anyway. Thank you for coming in tonight.
Well, thank you all for taking some time out. Let's start out with how you all got involved in the film. Kane, let's start with you, because you're the first person to play Jason twice.
Right, I had played Jason Part 7, as we know, and interestingly, I don't think I've told this story too often, but I started hearing that they were going to do another Friday the 13th movie, The Eighth One. And I hadn't been contacted or anything, and one of the producers, I still had her phone number, and I called and I said, hey, you're doing another Friday the 13th. I'd like to play Jason again if you don't have another idea. And she was like, you would? Barbara Sachs. She was surprised that I wanted to play the character again, because Part 7 was not easy because of the makeup and stuff. And I said, of course I would love to. And that's when the process of me possibly doing it came about. If I hadn't really heard about it, I don't know if I ever would have done it. And I was happy to be a part of it again because I enjoyed the character so much. So.
Well, actually, as I told a couple of people, my ass didn't even know we were shooting a Friday the 13th. I thought I was going to Vancouver to shoot a movie called Burial at Sea. Tells how much I know, right? Kelly Hu told me exactly where I was going. So, pretty much I just did the regular audition process. They initially thought that they would have to go to, like, Detroit and some of these harder places to try to find a character to portray that Julius. Little did they know they were going to double back to little soft Hollywood and seek out a brother. And I went there. I literally had probably 8 or 9 sweatshirts on. And now anybody who knows when you audition for movies, they're always stone-faced. You know, they could just like totally be loving you, but they're stone-faced. They'll never let you know, right? After I did my thing, he said, you know what? Look, we're going to break protocol. We really like you. Now, how long will it take you to get some meat on your bones? And I'm like, what are you talking about? What dare you? He goes, look, how many sweatshirts do you have on there? Like 8, 10? I said 12. So they said, okay, if you can get some meat on your bones by the time you go to Vancouver, then you're Julius. And the rest is history, as they say.
Me? Hi, I was Susie. This was actually my very first Hollywood movie. I was green, as they say, small town, fresh off the boat, didn't know a thing about a thing. I was in Seattle and I got called up to Vancouver to audition, and I did my first little audition. It just so happened that my boyfriend in real life's name was Jim, and my boyfriend in the script was Jim. So while he was waiting in the hall, I got to do this great audition screaming for Jim, Jim. So it was so authentic. And then I got the call back. It was in the callback that I don't know if you guys have seen the movie, taking my top off, just a little bit, that I found out you had to take your top off. And my agent was like, have you heard of a little actress called Jamie Lee Curtis? And a little movie called Halloween. It'll be fine. So, third callback. They, what did I have to do? Oh, third callback, this is a story. They were like, but we got to make sure that you look good. So they sent me off with the casting director, and they took Polaroids of me, and then delivered the Polaroids to the director, the producers, while I waited in the other room to see if I, passed muster.
To me, too, by the way. I got those Polaroids.
They gave them back to me. That probably wouldn't fly in today's casting world, but anyway, it got cast. That was my first Hollywood movie. And I died right away.
Hi, thanks you guys for coming out. This is my very first convention, and it's just so cool to be here. So thank you, really, so much. I went through the regular process too, went to casting, got a call back with the director, Rob Hedden. He was divine, nailed it. He told me I nailed it. And then my agent called and said, Barb, you didn't book it. And I said, this is a really good lesson for you go out, you do your best work, and that's it. So I sent a big bouquet of flowers to the casting director, and I said, thank you, it was a great experience. I hope, your Colleen Van Dusen is wonderful. Well, a week later, I get a call from my agent, and she says, do you have a passport? And I said, yeah. She goes, you're going to Canada tomorrow. And all of a sudden, I don't know what the details were lining up, but the part was mine. And the rest, they say, is history.
So a very serious question now. How did the ship get out of Crystal Lake and get into the Atlantic Ocean?
That's for BC. That's all him.
You can't even ask the guy who thought he was going to shoot Barrel at sea. So,
Right, and I still have my original script. When I got the script, it was no longer called Burial at Sea. It was called Ashes to Ashes.
Ashes to Ashes. I have that script too.
And the killer in the script was called Ethan.
Ethan Dearborn.
Yep. And so I still have that just because I knew it wasn't, obviously, because I had heard they were doing it. And I thought it's kind of silly to hide the whole thing, but they did. And it was the same thing with Part 7. Part 7 was called Birthday Bash. The killer was also Ethan. But when I realized I was going to be playing the part again, first of all, I was very excited, as you can imagine, because nobody had ever done the character more than once. So I felt very honored that they would consider it. And I remember getting up to Vancouver, because we were up there for 2 months or so.
Yeah, it was.
And Barbara and I would hang out on our time off and play trivia at the Holiday Inn Hotel close by.
We did.
And I've never been back to Vancouver since, but one time when I was walking back, I think I was just by myself from playing trivia, there was wet cement on one of the curves, and I put Jason Lives in the wet cement, and I want so badly to go back there and see if it's still there.
Yeah.
Because that would be cool as hell. I did it in 1989, and it's still there, and it'd be fun.
Yeah.
So, Kane, at the end of the film, Jason has a scene where he throws up. According to a report, you actually did that. Is there any truth to that?
That's completely true, yes. This is just for the ladies. I can throw up at will. Now, I know that's very attractive, but I can puke whenever I want, which is kind of fucked up in the head, really. But, so, in order to do that scene where the water comes gushing out of Jason's mouth toward the end, where the water's coming down the tunnel or the toxic waste, whatever, and I was talking to Rob Hedden, the director, and he says, how are we going to rig water to come gushing out of your mouth? And I said, well, how about if I just puke it out? He goes, yeah, really, but how are we going to do it? I said, I can do that. So I drank a pitcher and a half of water, which I come to find out is dangerous to do, health-wise. And then I said, Rob, you got to roll that camera. And then I gushed the water out. So yeah, that's
Thanks for
actually,
sharing.
yeah.
That was really special.
You want this? I just did it back there before we came out up here for fun.
And now
Make
for
sure
the
we still have
demonstration
it.
part of the talk. We all kind of want to see that.
Yeah, here's some water, King.
I'll do it right now.
So most of the film was shot on a boat. Talk about the conditions of the shoot. Sort of-
Very cramped. I mean, in the scenes where Scott Reeves and Peter Mark Richmond and Warren Munson, who played the captain, we were all in the captain's quarter. And we were all standing. I mean, these rooms were so small, and it was just crazy trying to do the scene and look like it was not a tiny little room.
I shot in a box for 2.5 days, like literally crouched.
Yeah, she wasn't even on the ship. She was on the little boat,
Yeah.
which I was just telling the story that Saffron didn't even know, that when she goes down into the hatch.
Tiffany.
Oh, yes, I did, sorry. I'm thinking of another character. When she goes down in the hatch, right?
Yes, I do that.
And there had to be a camera POV of her looking up at me. I opened the hatch and just for fun I had a big dildo hanging out of my pants. Just to entertain myself, really, because you're in that stuff and it gets to be very...
I was not there for this portion of the
No.
That's
No.
a shame. That's a
Unfortunately, she wasn't there. I was looking at the camera guy, but so yeah, that was just done, and nobody ever even knew about it for 25 years. A few years ago, somebody brought me the photo.
Oh,
Somehow we got a hold of the footage, the original footage, and made a print out of it. And now it exists somewhere. So
awesome. That's
You
awesome.
know what? As far as like on the ships, the where they filmed the boxing scene when Julius was fighting the other high school person, that ship, it was full of rats. It was full of rats, and it was the same ship to where they run out and they first decide to regroup and go find this guy. No, that was at the end. When he throws all the weapons or whatever on the map, there were so many rats in this ship.
I remember.
And yeah, and the thing about it is, though, I guess they were afraid of the lights and whatnot. But at the same token, if you saw the size of some of that rat shit, and you know, I'm like, whoever laid that, I really hope they say afraid of these lights. I mean, I'm talking, it was not a big plushy adventure, you know.
I think there was a story in my book about the rats, wasn't there?
Was it?
Where I took a break, and you know, every shot spritzed me and so I'd always look wet. And they put slime on, and I went down to a different level when I had a little break, and I laid on the floor because I couldn't really sit in anything because I'd slime it up. So I laid on the floor and I fell asleep. This is one night when we were shooting. And I woke to somebody bumping me to get me up to go do the next shot, I thought. And I looked, I didn't see anybody, and it was a fucking rat was tapping me, trying to eat the slime and shit on me. It's like, okay, I think I won't go down there anymore. There were so many rats. And Tiffany, you didn't get to experience any of the rats, darn it. Because you had a nice little clean boat.
She had a little box.
So Tiffany, talk about filming your character's death scene. How did that, the special effect and everything, how did that go?
How did it go? What I remember most of all about filming my death scene is that I was really not good about the first, 5 or 10 takes. I was dying very gently, like, oh, so, no, please, no. And I just remember our director kept coming back, and he's like, no, you gotta give it to us. No. And I don't remember how we finally got the last take, but I know they had to bring Kane back over, and they had that, he got that spear gun so close to me, and it was like...
And it was real.
And it was real. And this gentleman was truly terrifying. The sweetest man on the planet, but truly terrifying. And that was like, it was like, no, please. And then I died.
If only he knew your fucking name, right? Sorry. I don't know why I was thinking of Saffron Burrow.
I don't know. Next, she's coming to the next one.
DC, I read that you were told to actually punch Kane in your fight scene. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, just prior to the scene, well, let me start by saying they had a trainer working with me for, weeks prior to the scene, you know, so there was already this internal build-up in that, okay, here we go, you know. And it wasn't even so much the production as saying, hey, you need to really hit him. I just told Kane, I was like, hey man, you know what we're getting ready to do here? I said, you gonna go for it or whatever? And Kane unknowingly, he's like, yeah. He didn't know, no, when I said go for it, I mean go for this shit. I mean, you know? And literally, it was the whole night, just back and forth, but those were real punches.
All of the body shots
Those
were landing.
punches.
Every
Those were
single
real
one.
punches. And like at the end of the movie, at the end of that scene, when you see the swollen knuckles, well, the only thing about that was special effects was the little blood that they like painted on the knuckles. The swollen knuckles, those were real, baby. That was all me, you know. And yeah, man, we just did it.
It was great, and I was my night off, and I thought, I cannot miss this scene. I have got to see this. So I turned up on set, and we were shooting from 7 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock in the morning every night. And I walked up, and the director was like, what are you doing here? It's your night off. I said, I can't miss the fight scene. This is the scene, and his head comes off. It was too cool.
I think it's just amazing that he has a head. That's the actual head to lose in the film.
Yeah.
You know what? And funny story.
Great story.
When they finished shooting we finished shooting the movie, Jamie Brown, the special effects guy, he goes, well, hey, DC, do you want the head? And I was yeah, well, sure. He goes, yeah, because if not, we're just going to throw him in the garbage. So I'm like, okay, well, cool. But now, mind you, when this movie was done, we were not in the era with the TSA and all this shit. I brought those heads back. There was 3 of them in a hefty bag on the airplane, okay? That lets you know how long ago this movie was made. You know what I mean? And there was nobody batted an eye. There was the one that's out there on the table for close-ups, and there was a heavier one that made the thud hitting the garbage can, and then there was a lighter one that they tossed up in the air. But all 3 of them, Captain Steel Sack and me, sitting right there on 22D. You know? So, yeah, we've come a long way, baby.
And when we did the shot where I punched the head off the dummy, I had no idea that there was such a rigid structure inside the head on the one that fell. And I said, I'm going to punch, but Jason wouldn't throw a regular punch. So I just did a big arm sweep punch like that to make it look not so, you know, boxerish, human type thing. And as soon as I hit that fucking thing, and it just about broke my wrist because of the structure inside the head, I was like, God damn! And then I'm watching it fall down, and it did go in the dumpster for real the first day.
And it's solid, and it is very heavy. It's concrete, though. Damn near. It's really heavy, that particular head.
So, Barbara, many of your scenes were with Peter and Jensen. Talk about working with them.
Peter and Jensen were great. Oh, Peter plays such an asshole in this movie, and he could not be a nicer human being. He was funny, and he'd always, you know, make me laugh. And Jensen, you know, we really had this between, you know, Colleen and her student having this relationship. It was kind of like Jensen and me. I felt very protective of her. I wanted to make sure she was okay, and you know, were you eating okay? Were you getting enough sleep? And I was always looking after her. So it was the love you were seeing on screen. I really felt for her. And when the girls pushed her off the boat and she fell in the water, oh my God, it was awful. It was just awful. Those mean girls.
It's taking her back. In this moment, it's taking her back.
Give her a moment.
That's right.
Kane, so let's talk about the Times Square scene. Let's just walk us through that, if you could.
Yeah, been now in this business for 41 years. Done, I think, 150 some films and a lot of TV. That is still the most amazing day of filming I've ever had in my career. Being in Times Square 1989, after we finished everything in Vancouver, Scott, Jensen, myself went to New York. Oh, actually, you were there too, right? Yeah.
No.
Oh, that was still Vancouver in the boat, in the rowboat? Oh, okay. But then we got to Times Square, and this was, if I recall, it was on a Friday night, and I don't think this could ever happen again now, but we had the entire area in Times Square for shooting the film. We had NYPD blocking all streets that go into Times Square with barricades. There were thousands of people watching us filming, and we're out in Times Square area by ourselves, and I'm in the whole thing, and people are just going nuts because Jason, typically tourists don't get to see a filming of Jason, and here I am in the middle of Times Square, and as they know, in between shots, a lot of times I take the hockey mask off to get a breather and just relax, get something to drink. But while we were in Times Square, I never took the hockey mask off because I didn't want to ruin the image of what people were watching. And just to be in between shots, standing there, and I've done this before at panels, but just to turn and look in a certain direction, fucking people would go nuts, cheering because I'm looking in their direction. And it was just such an amazing, one night is what we shot in Times Square. And it was still, it'll always be my favorite night of shooting on anything.
So, Tiffany, when you shot your scenes, did you ever think that, all these years later, you would be at a convention talking to fans about this film and being in the, core legends of the victim of Jason?
Well, I certainly never did when I originally did the movie, but I will tell you that just going through the years, still, it amazes me to this day. Every so often, I'll get a packet of fan mail still asking me to sign things. People track you down, so it's something that I think is amazingly cool. It's one of the high points of my career. It's a huge honor to have been killed by this gentleman, and I'm really proud of it. I think and the horror fans are the best fans in the world. So I'm thrilled, and I'm super excited. It's my first time too, so to be here, it's really great.
So, Lisa, I read that you were actually injured in the phone booth scene. Can you tell us what happened with that?
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about this a little while ago. In the phone booth, they have, it's not real glass. It's some kind of sugar glaze or some kind of trick that they use. Anyway, the particular pane that Kane was going to be punching through allegedly was to have a little perforated circle right in the center of the pane, right? So that when he punches through, it would come through the hole more so than just the entire pane coming through. Well, the housings on the phone booth was very old, and instead of that breaking away as it should, the whole pane of glass came through. Now, granted, it is still sugar glass, so it's fake. It's
Well,
not
no,
real.
actually, it's not.
That was real glass?
That's the thing. It was tempered glass, and what we do a lot of times doing stunts with glass, if it isn't candy glass, we call it, then that's easy to break. But the reason it didn't break, because when you have tempered glass, you have a little squib that is detonated, and it instantaneously shatters a big window as you punch it. Now, the squib did not break that glass, so that was real glass that hit you. That's
Okay,
why.
well, I ended up in the hospital.
Yeah, I punched the pane, and because it's tempered glass, it didn't, and they didn't do the squib, it didn't shatter. I knocked the whole pane out, then it broke on his head.
Yeah, but it was more glass in the bottom of the phone booth than was expected. So I went to run out, and I think I fell on the glass.
Right.
But yeah,
You
it
did.
did hit the head, but it was so much glass in the bottom of the booth. And all I knew is, I'm going down, right? And there was more movie to shoot, so I'm like, okay, it's either the face or the hands. So the hands took it, baby.
And that's why it was so tough, because it was real glass.
Yeah, and so then I had to go to emergency, and they were like...
And you got to watch that scene, and watch as I punch and it doesn't do what I expect, you can tell I'm like, oh, what the fuck? And I try to continue.
In your head goes, yeah. I was just telling somebody on the table that. I said, when the character Julius runs out, your normal reaction would be to see him run out and then, do that thing you do here. But he goes, because my ass is on the ground.
You can tell it didn't go the way we expected.
Yeah, but obviously that was a take that they used, because after that it's just like, hey, you use it or...
Oh yeah, you might as well, because it looked good still.
Yeah.
So, using takes, do you guys remember anything that was filmed that didn't make it into the final cut?
Dildo.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe every time Scott Reeves would have a scene with us, he wanted to check to make sure that he didn't have boogers in his nose. So he'd walk up to you and go, friends, do I have any friends? No, Scott, no friends today. At every single scene. But in the back of the car, we really couldn't get out because we were in a real police car and the back seats don't have handles. So in the scene where we're trying to get out of the car, going down the alley, we're trying to get out and it's like, there's no doors that we can't get. So it was kind of really real. We were really stuck in that car.
Well, as far as real too, there's the shot of me where my boyfriend is dead, and he's coming after me, and I remember Rob saying, we have one take, because they were shooting, he was going to shoot the spear gun at my head, do you remember this? Into the wall, and it was going to bust out the wall. So it was like, you gotta make it look real, because you get one shot at this, and oh my God, when there's a spear gun, a real spear gun, at your head. So that shot is one of my favorites. It's right there, and it smashes into the wall, and it's so loud, and inches from your face. It was a good shot, by the way. That was terrifying, and it made it. I think that's the one and only take that we did. The other thing that I always remember is the first script that I got, Susie Donaldson, was supposed to do what I assume any of us would do if we were on a boat and there was a crazed killer chasing after you. You would probably want to jump overboard and swim for it. And it was, I forget what month it was, but it was freezing cold, and they were like, sorry, we're not paying for a stunt woman to jump into this cold water, we gotta regroup. And that's when they came up with just get in that hole, because that makes sense. Just get in that hole. And
where you
they'll
can't
never
escape.
find you.
I had a scene that didn't cut, actually. The scene made it, but when they throw Julius overboard, okay, they filmed that in what's called an aquatic center. So it's basically like a large gymnasium full of water with these big barrels on the side. And then when they say action, the hydraulics pump the barrels and they make the water look like it's in the ocean and whatnot. Well, when they were in, after you think that Julius has been thrown overboard, well, I'm down in the water on basically cinder blocks, okay? They didn't anticipate that when I saw there was a light underneath the water, and when I saw that light, that was when I was supposed to spring up out of the water and come into the boat, and then, okay, he's not dead kind of vibe. Well, I see the light, but at the same time, these damn barrels start pumping the freaking water, and it moves the boat. So when I thought I was going to be coming straight up, well, guess what, man? The boat was there. I came up, and the whole front side of my face, the lips, and the whole shot. Now, that wasn't in the movie, so watch out. We're not talking about...
You had such a tough time.
Oh, yeah, it was a bitch. It was hard for the money, baby. Yeah, so that didn't make it.
Yeah. You guys tell the story about Toby the dog. You guys remember Toby? When we had him in the boat?
They hired a dog who was afraid of water. The dog pissed on Jensen every single day. They hired a showbiz dog who was afraid of water. So yeah.
And it was raining. I mean, they had the sprinkler system rigged up, and everybody behind the camera has on these gigantic, fur-lined coats trying to stay warm. And we're in our little costumes, and the rain is pelting, just pouring down on us. and Toby's peeing on Jensen.
Well, wait, you know what? That was a really eventful scene too, because they kept having to redo the sound for that, okay? Because I think at one point you and Peter were like asleep, and just before they roll into New York, right?
Yeah.
It's just Scott and we're rowing the boat. Well, the sound people, they had to keep reshooting it because we're tired, and they said, okay, well, you strain it. So I'm like, Scott's like, They're like, you know what, this sounds like it's a freaking boring. And, you know, anyway, it's kind of crazy, but it's the same. They kept having to do it. Keep doing it over and over because it's just the sound. Just saying, like, you know what, this doesn't sound like this is this type of movie. But
That sounded good.
so that didn't make it.
Kane, Jason had more of a monster look in part 7. It sort of dialed back in part 8. Do you know why that change was made?
Simply because they changed makeup effects people. You know, every time a makeup effects artist, coordinator of a film, they want to do their own vision. So I did 4 movies as Jason with a completely different look every time, which kind of is weird when you try to have continuity with the character, but I think that's all it was. It was a different person, and he was a Canadian guy this time because we were shooting the whole movie there, and he had some good ideas that he told me about, but they didn't really materialize. I was supposed to have like under the bag, under my eye was supposed to be like liquid, like a sack of liquid, which would have looked cool as hell, but it just became just a bump of foam latex. But, you know, there was one scene that was completely changed. It was a kill of, I think it was another boxer or something? The original kill was darts in the eyeballs.
Yeah.
And then they didn't think it was dramatic enough or whatever, so we went back and shot that character getting killed with the
sauna and the steam.
sauna. Yeah, and the
But
steam.
that you know, that was a different. You know the story
Yeah.
behind that, right?
Different guy, right?
Yeah, that in that particular scene, if you notice, the guy that Julius was boxing when the girls first see him down there, that guy was kind of thick. You know what I mean? And the guy that Kane killed after that, you know, hey Julius, nice fight. I mean, this guy was like a spaghetti stick, and you know, he's very, very thin. Welcome to find out when they went back to reshoot that kill, that guy. He didn't have freedom at the time.
Is that
He was
right?
locked up. He was
I
locked
never
up.
knew that.
Yeah.
So they had to use a new actor, which is why he conveniently is laying in the sauna with a towel on his face.
Exactly.
So we can't see that it's a different actor. That's the only reason.
That's funny. I
He
didn't know
didn't
that.
have freedom. So the original poster showed Jason slashing through an I Love New York poster. But that was later changed with the poster of Jason moving over the city. I guess the New York people didn't like that. Talk about that as well as censorship with horror films.
Well, I'm not even sure that New Yorkers really did complain about that. I always thought that maybe that was something to get, you know, people talking about it. Oh, New York didn't like slashing through the I Love New York thing. I'm not even sure if that was really the case, but it was a good angle to advertise. Oh, we had to change it because New Yorkers didn't like it, whatever. There's supposed to be a version of that poster. I've never seen it. I don't know if this is true or not, but there's supposed to be a version of that poster that has blood on the knife. And if you ever see that, pick it up because it's supposed to be incredibly valuable. I think they only made just 5 of them or something. And they never used it. So. What? What?
I had one and I gave it. I had it framed for 100 years, but I
With the blood on the
yes,
knife?
and I gave it to what he's
To who?
Bart.
I'm gonna kill that motherfucker.
He's got it in his house.
With blood on the knife, are you serious?
I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
He
I've
told me
never
to tell
even
you
seen
hi,
it.
by the way.
Wow.
I had heard that the Board of Tourism went to Paramount and requested that they change it. But yeah,
I mean,
got
if
a lot
they
of it.
did, you know, it's interesting, but if they didn't, it's interesting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's somebody thought of a good angle.
Yeah.
Hey, if it isn't true, Maybe it is, I don't know, but I
They
always
also
thought.
started breaking into the bus stops and stealing the one sheets, the posters, right?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, once they pulled it, because what I had heard was that what I heard was that the all cities and municipalities, they own the rights to that I Love San Francisco just by sort of like a domain type of thing. That was the story that I got. So then the minute that Paramount, I guess, quote unquote, didn't get proper authorization to use it, at that point, regardless of what story is true, it created the buzz, and so poster immediately became limited. So that's when you started hearing these stories about people breaking in bus stops and stealing the one sheet, the posters and whatnot. So it all just created buzz, you know?
And while we were still shooting in Vancouver, they said they wanted to shoot a teaser, which they wanted to shoot in New York so you could see the skyline. And you can still find this online, where there's like nice music playing and the camera's coming in slowly on the back of someone standing on the docks in Jersey with the New York skyline on the other side. And then he turns around and you realize it's Jason. And it's to promote the fact that we're doing a new Friday the 13th. And they told me in Vancouver, yeah, we're going to shoot that. And I said, great, when do I go? And they said, well, we're going to have to do it with somebody else. And I was like, oh, shit.
So that's not you on that?
And when you see a guy standing with his back to you, and then he turns, and I fucking hated it, because he turns and he goes, I said, that looks terrible. And I hope people don't think it was me, because it was so out of character, the way he turns and squats, and whether he was directed to do that or not, he should not have done it. And I've always hated that. And I've never met that guy yet, but I will, I bet. One day he's going to say, I'm the guy that did the teaser, and I'm going to knock him unconscious, and then kick him in the balls. So,
Why did you squat?
Speaking of promotion for the film, Jason made an appearance on Arsenio Hall. Talk about that experience if you could.
that was me this time. Arsenio called and said, want Jason. He said, first of all, I want Kane Hodder to be on the show as a guest. I said, great, that'd be fun. He says, I want you to be as Jason in character. And I'm like thinking, you dumb fuck, I don't talk. And he said, well, I thought that, I didn't say it. I said, you know I don't talk, right? And he said, that's the whole point. I'm going to have you in character, and I'm going to try to ask you questions which you don't answer. And I thought, okay, that's pretty cool. And it was a lot of fun doing it. And two things he told me before we started the show. He said, first of all, don't think it's lame, but I'm terrified of you as that character. And I said, okay, that's a mental check mark right there for later. And he said, and, you know, so before I go on, I want to say that at the end of it, when you watch it, when he goes to shake my hand, I grab his hand and I pull him towards me, and he was terrified. Jumped up, stood up, and said, good night, Devin, thank you. But he wanted me to not know what he was going to ask. So he didn't tell me any of the questions he was going to ask me. They seem kind of lame now when you watch it, but at the time, they were hilarious.
Oh, no, it was great. I absolutely love.
And it was so hard for me. I could smile and laugh, which I was doing, but I had the hockey mask on, so you can't tell. But it was so hard not to show that I was laughing like this, with moving my body. So it was fun to challenge myself to not show that I thought he was funny, to still look, you know, scary or whatever.
What about the 80s? Was it that made the genre thrive, the horror genre?
Oh, it was the clothes. Weren't they just divine?
The hair and the big hair.
Yeah.
I also think there were no cell phones, there were no computers. Like, you couldn't just call somebody and warn them that something was going down. Like, you actually had to go invest. You know, it's just like a sweeter time.
You could page them, though. You could page somebody. Oh, wait, I'm getting a page.
I think the same thing, because it was just, the times were just a lot less complicated and less, complex, to the point of where you didn't have so much shit going on in real life. You could actually willingly suspend your disbelief and believe that this mass killer is chasing you. As opposed to, like I was just telling somebody earlier, they asked me what scares me, and I'm like, you know what? I'm on straight or whatever, but the stuff that scares me that really, as I say, grinds my ass to the bone, is something that could conceivably be real, like some kind of demonic something, or that possession, that shit. That is real scary to me. But I just say that to say, because back then, it was more innocent, so you could actually go there. Now, stuff is so complex, you got people doing everything, so it's just kind of like, we've outgrown, in my opinion, the ability to be scared on that level. Do you know what I'm saying? That sounding crazy?
And every night, I used to, Kane and I would do our trivia at the Holiday Inn, and I'd say, so who do you get to kill tomorrow? Because every day he had a new kill and a new weapon.
And that person would go home.
And that person
You would send your ass back to LA.
I was so happy to make it to the almost end of the film.
All right, we have some time for some questions from the audience.
So, Kane, you've gone on before and said that the body bag kill was your favorite. Was there any kills in Takes Manhattan that was your personal favorite?
Yeah, the sleeping bag happens to be my favorite Jason kill I've ever done. Very high up on the list are his head punch and the frozen head from Jason X. Those are just classics. I mean, because that brought cheers to the audience when they watched it. Because they didn't expect, especially what he says to me right before. If he's not asking for me to knock his fucking head off, then I don't know who is.
Did any of y'all watch any of the first movies to get the backstory of Jason, to understand maybe it a little bit more?
We didn't have YouTube back then.
But I mean, did you just like
VCRs. I watched the first one. I knew that there was campers.
I watched the one just prior to ours, number 7. That's ironically the only Friday the 13th that I had seen before doing ours. Subsequently, I've seen obviously damn near all of them now. But before shooting ours, I had just seen number 7.
And I had seen all of the previous ones just because I was a fan. I loved the character. And, forgive me, those of you that have heard me say this before, but just put yourself in my position. You're a huge horror fan. You've watched this character for 6 films, and now you're going to be playing that character. Can you imagine how incredible that felt for me to be a fan of that character, and now I'm going to be the guy? So I went back and watched all the previous movies again, just to see what little things that some of the guys before me did, what I didn't like, what I did like, to develop my own version. But, I had
Let me piggyback on something he's saying. And it's interesting, and not just because I know this guy, but if you look at all the others, there is a distinction between the way he plays Jason and all the rest. And this coming from a person who, as I said, I had only seen number 7 before, but in the way I kind of characterize it, I mean, whereas like any of the other Jasons, they turn this way, just the way Kane does it, there is definitely a difference in the performance. And you would think that, okay, well, if you've got a mask on, you're not able to see the face and whatnot. No, but that's acting. That's acting, and you are
And for me,
definitely the best Jason.
it was
Without a doubt.
and for me, it was the breathing. It was, and his chest coming up and down. I mean, it was like, oh my God, he's alive.
Yeah, I did that before we started shooting Part 7. I would stare at myself with the entire makeup on in the mirror and trying to intimidate myself. And when I would just stand staring, I would think, God, it almost looks like a mannequin. So what can I do to make him still look alive and about to spring? And that's when I came up with the breathing thing. And then to me it looked like, holy shit, this guy's about to explode.
Yeah.
And and people had responded to it. And somebody once, years ago, when I first started doing conventions, said, my favorite thing that you do as Jason is when you turn your head and then your body follows. And I was like, I do? I didn't even know I did that. I just did something, I did what felt right, and fortunately it worked. So.
Can I ask a question? When you first auditioned for part 7, when you went into the audition, did you audition with a hockey mask on? And what was your audition? Because you didn't have any lines. Was it just, how did you get that role?
Actually, I never did audition. I had done a movie for Rennie Harlan called Prison. And I was the stunt coordinator, and I did all the stunts myself. And at the end of the film, John Beekler, who was the makeup effects guy on that film, this is 1987, and he asked me if I would mind putting a full body makeup on. Had I ever done it before? And I said, no, I haven't. And it was 3.5 hours of makeup, just like the Part 7 stuff ended up being, where I had dentures, lenses, 7-piece prosthetics on my head, full body, hands, everything. And he really enjoyed how I worked in that type of makeup. So John Beekler, knowing that from the Prison film, said when he was hired to direct Part 7, and what worked in my favor is that Jason had to do so many stunts in Part 7. So it absolutely had to be a stunt guy this time. Because it doesn't make any sense to hire an actor to do some of the scenes and then a stunt guy to do all the action scenes. It's never going to look consistent. So they knew they had to hire a stunt person, and Beekler was like, I know the guy. So he pushed and pushed for me, and I had meetings with producers at Paramount, just sit-down meetings, and one of the producers were like, I don't think he's big enough. And, so John said, that's not going to matter, trust me, he's going to work well in the makeup, whatever. So eventually, Beekler had to finance himself a screen test where I put on a version of the Jason stuff. I brought in one of my stunt buddies, and we did a bunch of scenes, and he shot it, edited it, and presented it to Paramount to say, see, this is what the guy can do. And fortunately, that's what got me the job. But I ad-libbed all kinds of stuff in that screen test, and there were producers there sitting at a table. And while we were rolling the cameras, they never used this part, and I wish I could find it. While the camera was rolling, I walked over and stared at the producers, and I grabbed the table that they were sitting at and threw it against the wall, and then glared at them and walked away. And they're like, oh, okay, good. I guess he'll be the guy. So that's the way I got it. It was never really an audition, but there was a screen test to prove what I could do, I guess.
Friday the 13th has definitely been one that's stood time, decade, old generation. With everything being remade these days, classic movies being remade, just as a general cast, how do y'all feel about it? Y'all think it does it justice to the original movie? Do you think they try to take a new direction? Because while there's so many of these Friday the 13th, the remake had one, and I haven't heard any more of it going any further than that.
I mean, I can't say I'm against it because I didn't become the character till the 7th film. So if there wasn't successive movies, I would never be in that role. So I just, the only Friday the 13th I've never seen happens to be the most recent, what I guess you could call the remake. Because I saw a couple of things in the trailer and I was like, man, that's not what I pictured Jason as. Building tunnels and traps and growing weed or some shit, I don't know. And it just didn't seem like what I knew the character to be, so I didn't happen to see it. Derek is a friend of mine, so I have nothing against him, but you can only do so much as the performer too. If they're adamant about doing things a certain way, then they're going to do it, which is why I didn't play Jason in Freddy vs. Jason. I thought I was getting the script and everything, you've heard it, but I was replaced and never told why, so.
What I think as far as like on the remakes, though, the one thing that I wish that when they do the remakes, that they would not sort of slight on the creativity of it and still try to be original, because I do believe that the remakes are necessary for the simple fact that you have to have stuff that's relevant. I mean, you can't have a movie, make a movie right now and nobody has a cell phone. I mean, so if there was no cell phone back in 1982 or 1979 and you've got some high school kids, okay, well you need the movie reflecting them texting or, you know, so they have to stay relevant. So in that way, I really believe that that's one of the main reasons. Just so, not just to reach out to a newer, younger audience, but just so you can have material that reflects real life. But on the same token, you can't slide on the creativity too. I mean, there's gotta be some more ways that he can kill somebody. I mean, come on.
I still have ideas.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, but I think the remakes are necessary just if for no other reason than just to reflect exactly where we are now, you know?
While we've been sitting up here, I have thought of 3 new ways to kill this fucking guy in the red hat. Just for fun. Nothing against you. Yeah, you. It's just, you happen to be sitting there and it popped into my mind what I can do to you. So, yeah, nothing personal at all. I'm sure you've gotten that before. Come on.
Well, thank you guys again for taking some time to stop by, see them, get an autograph picture. Put your hands together for it.